Hey everybody, Corrie Thorne here, the founder, the creator, and author of More Than Existing. I am stopping in to do a few of these videos just to tell you a little bit more about the More Than Existing program, about the other programs that I have in the More Than Existing Academy of Higher Consciousness, and a little bit of a peek inside of everything that I do. Each and every one of these videos incorporate a little bit of me, a little bit of my work, and a little bit of what I can offer you either in an individual session or by taking part in one of my many programs. Some are taught live, others are pre-recorded, such as my soul revival of the divine goddess within, and that is the everyday goddess work that goes with my everyday goddess oracle cards that you'll see starting to come out in 2022. We've had to make some changes, so when you see them, they will look different. But I also have a whole lot about More Than Existing. It is a 4-level program that is offered in stages of first making it about you, and then starting to advance into looking in, as if say, taking back that power and doing the healing work that needs to be done. And if you so choose, you can move on to become a light worker, healer, coach through the More Than Existing program your own self and be certified as a More Than Existing light worker coach. So many opportunities through my work, through my program, and you can purchase my book on amazon.ca.com, Barnes & Noble, and Balboa Press. So welcome. Blah, a lot to get out, but I want to talk a little bit today about one of the first things that I start to teach, and I incorporate this into almost everything that I do. Almost everything that I have out there will speak a little bit about the power of learning to trust your own free will, thinking for yourself, and knowing that the power of being able to trust your own inner authority and to be able to strengthen and heal so that you can trust your instinctual self, and that you can then be able to incorporate that into your intuition. So I am a psychic medium. I am a life coach. And I do all that work as well. But I also take us back and look back through our lives without being triggered into, without triggering the past, without having to go back and relive history. You've already lived it once. You don't need to relive it again. You've already been there. This is about looking at the programming, looking at the way that we have the way that we have been conditioned to be tied to beliefs and values, and to look at our own identity and to really look deeply at it. So today I just want to talk a little bit about language and how we are so manipulated and controlled by language, including how we speak to ourselves. And it's often a pattern, sometimes often used as a survival, sometimes used as a way of manipulating situations or people, or to be able to stay in the energy of whoever and whatever you are trying to hold on and to be. So speaking of this was me looking at the areas where, we all have these words and that we use. We all have this language that we sometimes get tied up in. And we also have it's that, I want to say, like that mind control of being able to kind of, let me put it this way. We all have a little bit of a narcissistic tendency. We all have something of when we want things to go our way, or when we want to hold on so tightly to who and what we are, when we don't want things to fall apart, that sometimes needs to fall apart, is that we hold on tighter than ever to just be able to prove that we're right, or to be able to say that I'm going to prove everybody else wrong. This time I'm not going to be that failure. This time I'm not going to fail in a relationship. This time I'm going to be the one to succeed. This time I'm going to be the number one. And so this is where a lot of assumption and assuming comes in. And when we're often in that energy, when we often don't even know that we do this, it is sometimes it's unconscious, when we have absolutely no idea that it's an abnormal or a unhealthy way of communicating or speaking to each other, the language that we use, the questioning or the assumptions that we make, the identifying people based on what we believe or what we think we've seen, and then having that identity that way. So there's so many things that are at play that often in your own programming or in survival. So when you're in that survival mode and everything that you do is that you're there to kind of fool and trick the world so that no one can catch on to who and what you are. And that sometimes leaves you with enemies. So for example, I just want to use something like, and I teach this in More Than Existing. How often do you hear people say, that's just the kind of people we are, or that's just the kind of people they are. Like all of those people are like that. Well, what people? Who are you referring to? And how do you know? How do you know all people are like that? Where did you learn that? So if you have an image or an ingrained, like really embedded story about a specific group. So say you grew up in poverty, say you grew up, in your world that you existed in, where there wasn't a lot of money, that you couldn't afford things. There might have been a lot of trauma. There might have been a lot of drama, chaos. And then you look into, the lives of people who are the total opposite spectrum of you. And you've been told your whole life that, well, those kind of people are, they hate us. They think they're better than us. They're snobby, because maybe one person in your family may have had one experience with somebody who may have looked like, or they may have thought were of that world, poor rich story, that may have been that rich snobby person that they've identified, right? They've already identified a class of people, but then they've taught that to every child in the family to, and it may have been passed down generations and generations. It's like you're not allowed on the other side of the tracks. You're not allowed on the other side of the story. And so you may live in a crippling, limited, not true belief story based on one person having an unhealthy experience where they created a whole story around who and what they thought one person was based on an experience. And it may be someone who may just have had a little bit more than them. And so if that was your parents or that was your grandparents and that story continued, then you identify by that. So chances of believing that you can be anything other than that. So you may then reject anything that may be of wealth, of living a healthier life, a happier life, anything that looks like that. You may be, always saying, well, we can't look like we have money, so we got to stay in a smaller house. We can't buy new things. So you may become that whole not wanting people to perceive you a certain way. So you make sure that you don't appear that way. So you do everything to reject the possibility that it's okay that you can look and act a certain way. And it's amazing how powerful those statements and the combination of those words, or the creation of a story in somebody else's mind can have such power for generations and generations and generations later. And I really teach that in More Than Existing as a way of, if that's your story, then there's a lot of places in your life where you are just existing. And that once you find somebody who's different than that, well, now the story is not true. Once you start to get a different perspective or a different view, or you meet somebody from the other side of the tracks who's not anything like you were told, or you may start to become that person yourself. And then you're like, well, I'm not like that. So when does that truth that somebody else has made into a conviction, a belief, and then behaviors and limited to, association based on those stories. And when that, what was a so-called truth then becomes a lie, then the whole thing starts to crumble. And when your stories start to crumble, when the way that you thought things were start to crumble, it's amazing how different your story will become. So if you have that in your stories, if that's one of yours, and that's just one area that we look at and that we explore. And it's the same thing as being in a relationship with somebody who keeps breaking that spirit of you. It's not about them, breaking you down, breaking down or tearing you apart as in physical form. It's often about how they break the spirit of you by playing the mind games and causing you to really question who and what you are. And the problem is that you start to question, is that true? Am I really that way? And you start to accept a belief that is not true about you. So then you start to accept that. Or in another situation is that you hear other people say, well, this is what they did to me. This is what they are. And you believe that to be the truth. But do you know the other side of the story? There is always, there's this and that, and then there's a truth, right? And so sometimes people will turn good people into enemies to be able to keep their story alive. So in fact, if someone has a deep secret that they're always trying to keep, well, they're going to do anything to keep that from coming out. Or if they told some fibs and lies and they don't want those to come out, they don't want those to get anywhere, that's where we sweep it under the rug. They will do anything. They spend a lifetime in the fear and in the misery and having to constantly do everything to keep that story alive, to keep that running, that track running over and over again, is that it goes from one little white lie to one big lie that turns into one big major thing that then sometimes affects a lot of people. It breaks down groups. You see it in groups of, teenagers or kids, when one person says, might have one little unhealthy situation with a friend who just, who says, I don't want to play with you today. I'm sorry, but I just don't want to play. And it probably meant nothing other than they weren't in the mood to play. And then that other kid runs off because their feelings are hurt and says, that person's not very nice and we shouldn't have that person as a friend. And this person did that, and they did this. And so then they start to, because they are hurt, and the way they respond when they're hurt is to hurt other people, is to then try to counteract the hurt instead of saying, okay, I accept that. Thank you for being honest with me. But instead, it's that continual hurt. Well, that same kid who does that often will be the same kid who's going to carry that story forward. So if they're the kid that as a kid always felt like they were rejected, neglected, always being left out, understood, misinterpreted, then they're probably going to have some sort of trailing story that includes like, well, that's what they're like, and that's how they act. And it's like, well, how do you know that? And when nobody questions the behavior of that one person, or if you don't question in yourself, then it becomes a running story that then can take everybody in the group and get them so involved into one story, and they can take one innocent person, one good person, and make them out to be the most awful monster, because they will have something in their own experiences in their subconscious mind that has an emotional charge and connection where they can relate to it. And when you can relate to that, and then your emotions are not in that, you haven't healed through some of those things that trigger you, then you are triggered emotionally into a previous experience that you're attaching to that person. And then it becomes a whole lot worse. Now you have a story. Now you have a new story. And that's where the behaviors and the behaviors, the reactions, the response starts to become another sense of, of imagination becoming reality. And that is then you're making your conscious choices to walk away, to reject, to be not kind, to believe a story. There's so many things that starts to unfold, even though you have wisdom and knowledge, you have a previous experience of that person being good or being kind, it will not matter. If you have that one objective, you can so shut down and forget that somebody ever did anything any good. And all you've seen was that one experience. And then no matter what, you have just rejected everything else and you accept that to be a truth. And then that don't just affect the person that you're doing it to, it affects you. And when you start to question that in yourself, you start to question, why do I do that? I'm not a teenager. I'm not a kid. Like, this is where emotional and spiritual, where we see that immaturity, where we are stuck. That's where inner child healing becomes so important. So where we get stunted is often where we continually feel the emotions of a previous experience come forward into a new experience, and we let it kind of seep in. And when it seeps in, because the emotion still has such charge, then it becomes it becomes old, becoming revamped again. So that old is always being revamped. And then we bring it into our nows, we bring it into our tomorrows. We continue to bring it forward until we break the story, until we put a break in it, until we put the brakes on, we stop and go, okay, maybe I might be overreacting. Maybe this is not all true. I do remember good things. I do remember other things. Maybe that's my feelings. And maybe I was hurt. And then I want to hurt somebody else. But why do I want somebody else to hurt? Because you still want somebody to feel what you're feeling. And you still want people to understand. So our vices, our unhealthy behaviors have actually become very normalized in our society. We've actually started to, without even knowing, I don't think, like I think sometimes we do know, but it's that sense of we've normalized it so much because we've now used it to lay it on, oh, you're just human. Everybody is just human. Well, no, where do we take ownership and responsibility? So accountability is very important. So ownership and responsibility, when you can own your own behaviors and actions, then you can reject what is not yours. And until then, everything becomes just smorgasbord of energy. It just becomes this blended, like you're having a big ass potluck and everything starts to mix together and everything starts to taste alike. And when that happens, it's like it's hard to distinguish and know what is your truth, what is somebody else's truth, what beliefs that you're still believing that are not even your belief. Where did you learn that? It's amazing how deeply programmed we are and how ingrained and embedded these stories can be, that they can affect everything that we are existing in today. So if this really resonates with you and it really helps you, then, I have many courses that are happening before. There is the introduction to More Than Existing. There's one that's a pre-recorded right now in the More Than Existing Academy of Higher Consciousness. I am going to be teaching in the new unified.com in December. I'm going to be teaching the introduction live again in 3 classes. And then I also have a lot of this that is incorporated and bleeds into all of my work. It's in my book. It's in everything that I do. So I do have a chakra healing energy class coming up. And I also have the spiritual depression, which is about, that whole symptoms of when we're just kind of like knowing that it is time to start breaking open. Like we feel like we're just so confined and nothing is really making sense. We're depleted, we're away from ourselves, and we need to come home to us. And so it's that soul journey home to us. And so I have a 4-week class coming up about that, about awakening to our truth, awakening to the joy, the happiness of connecting back into who and what we are. And that one is coming up as well in November. So you can go to CorrieThorne.com. You can check it out. You can check out all of my stuff. You can even pull cards and just my TikTok videos that are about the card, a little bit about the cards. You can go there. And there's so many things that is also coming up as well for the coming year. And More Than Existing will be taught live again in January. Plus, we will be hopefully soon releasing the recorded versions as well, so you can do it in modules. But please keep following, subscribe, hit the notification button on my YouTube channel, and keep supporting. I also have She Is More Than Existing, my podcast, which is on another YouTube channel. And you can also see the link for that down below. Thank you. And I hope this resonates with you. And if it does, get yourself into the More Than Existing Academy of Higher Consciousness. It is free to enroll into the school, and there's a lot of free things that you can also do there as well, plus the many videos I have available right here on YouTube. Much love. Bye-bye.